All right, well, why don't we go ahead and get started? This is our Public Health and Safety meeting for January 2021. And we're going to work through our agenda, and we have several smaller things that I want us to touch on, and then we'll get to the chief. We want to talk about the MOU with Laura Marion, and I would anticipate we would take public comment at 7:20. So, okay, so let's begin. We have our agenda. We'll just take it in order. The EAC recommendations, this is something that as a committee, we have asked the EAC to send us more detailed recommendations on what we could spend the climate action plan implementation monies on in 2021. And I've spoken with Jesse Lytle, and that's something they're working on this month, and they will send to our committee for our February meeting. Okay, so the shade tree ordinance is the next item, and this is something that had come to us once before from Rick Traley's, the chair of Shade Tree, and it's a set of documents including a cover letter to our committee. And I'd like to take maybe a few minutes now to consider what they're proposing and think about next steps. Okay, so I could outline it briefly, and then we could have some discussion. So Rick, as Shade Tree Chair, has recommended that we allow for curb waivers. So in other words, if there's an existing tree in front of a home and that home turns over, because it's sold and the curb requirement kicks in, Shade Tree recommends that there be a waiver, to allow for old trees to stay in place. A second item is to add the planting of new shade trees in the right-of-way close to the sidewalk when houses turn over. So this is done with the sidewalk and with the curb. There's an inspection process. And so this is another recommendation, that there would be a tree planting requirement, just as there is a curb requirement and a sidewalk inspection every time a house is sold. A third element is to kind of clean up the existing shade tree ordinance and put in place a permitting process, which the existing ordinance calls for. But we don't currently have a permit process whereby, a homeowner that wants to take down a tree would first have to get a permit approved by the Shade Tree Commission. So those are, I think, the main points of what was sent over to us. And so let me just open it up to some discussion.
Yeah, Rob, I think it might be helpful for us, just as a starting place, to see if we agree that trees are an essential element of public infrastructure, equal to, say, a curb and a sidewalk. And if we agree on that, then we can talk about, then we can say, okay, so we regulate the installation and maintenance of curbs and sidewalks by homeowners at the time of the transfer of a property. Therefore, we should look to see, how do we regulate, what's an appropriate way to regulate the installation and maintenance of trees in the same way that we regulate the maintenance and installation of curbs and sidewalks. But I think we have to first decide if we agree that trees are an essential infrastructure equal to and as important as curbs and sidewalks.
Okay, thank you, Bob. Yeah, that's a good way to frame it. Mona?
I think that sounds like a good idea, what Bob is saying. I also think I wouldn't like to give a waiver unconditionally. I think it needs to be on a case-by-case basis. I think it needs to be balanced with accessibility of sidewalks. So for example, maybe you would look at, is the sidewalk on the opposite side of the block accessible or not? Because I think those are both important interests, you know, keeping trees.
Do you agree that trees are essential infrastructure?
Oh, yes, absolutely. For, yeah, to fight
Okay.
climate change, absolutely. For stormwater management, we have flooding in the borough, and also for fighting climate change. You know, I think for both of those, and for just their beauty, but I think, yes, they are essential infrastructure.
Livability. Okay.
Well-
You go back. I wasn't certain what the point you were making about the relationship of trees to sidewalks.
Well, this idea, right? Are we talking about how there'd be a waiver for fixing the sidewalks? Isn't that what we're talking about?
Well, it would be more for the curbs, you know, so installing a new curb where there is none currently.
Oh,
You
I
know,
thought it also applied to sidewalks, because some sidewalks are not really accessible because the tree roots have made the sidewalk go like that.
yeah, I mean, the recommendation from Shade Tree, my understanding is that the sidewalks would still need to be repaired, you know, but a new curb would not necessarily need to go in.
Oh, okay. Well, that's a different story.
And there's precedent for both with new development in the past 10 years. For example, when the North Wynwood Road development occurred, North Wynwood and Sabine Avenue, there were some really old growth trees close to the road. And the developer was given temporary approval to put asphalt sidewalks in where over the tree roots, and also to just have to not replace the curbing around those existing trees, but with the understanding that if the trees were to ever die and need to be replaced, that the curbs and sidewalks would be done at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a precedent for doing that, for giving for waiving the curbing requirement if it would endanger an old growth tree.
Mm-hmm. So, okay, so it sounds like we have some agreement. What about adding the tree planting piece to the, I guess it's the use and occupancy inspection?
And would that apply again only to trees that are in the right of way? Or
Right. Mm-hmm.
yes, I'm for it. Absolutely.
I'm for it as well. I think we have to, you know, I was looking over the detail of what the Shade Tree Commission recommended, and I think we probably have to work through with the larger council kind of the conditions of how the homeowner's expected to replace the tree. I'm not sure that we can legislate that they, you know, that the Shade Tree Commission volunteers to replace it, or I mean, a person might just want to go and buy their own tree and put it in, or maybe they want to propose an alternate location because for some reason their front yard's not the perfect ideal place for it. So they're going to propose an alternate location on that property.
Mm-hmm.
So that we don't run into any opposition from people who say, well, look, I just not going to put a tree in front of my house for whatever reason.
Mm-hmm.
So those are things I think we need to consider.
Yeah. So there may be alternative ways to satisfy the you know, if that were a new requirement, maybe there would be a way to opt out or satisfy it in some alternative way.
And maybe even if there's really some kind of a hardship, I think in some municipalities, the homeowner will make a contribution to say like an open space fund or a tree, you know, a tree fund or something that will help provide, you know, plant a tree or several trees somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's some other provision that gives, you know, in the event of some kind of need for a variance or a hardship to the requirement, there's still some action that's taken that results in a new tree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I know the Shade Tree the commission does have the Morris plan that was developed a couple of years back, the tree management plan, and it serves as a master plan for preserving the canopy in the right of way. And so that would be a reference point for the Shade Tree Commission and the Public Works Director in kind of sorting through, should a tree be planted here? Is this the best location, the best species? So, okay, well, I know we have other items on the agenda here. So let me just ask, what would be a next step that as a committee we could recommend? I mean, would you like to see, we haven't really talked about the permit process, and would you like to see all of these pieces kind of move ahead, maybe with some help from the solicitor? Or are we not ready for that?
I do think we're ready for the solicitor to look at this package of information, Rob, on behalf of the committee, and actually compare it to other existing legislation in other municipalities in southeastern Pennsylvania. Sort of take a measure of it against whatever Commonwealth regulations would, like this would regulate this kind of rule, or guide this kind of rule, and then come back to us with questions that they might have. So the solicitor would basically bring their questions back to this committee before so that we could kind of begin to iron out the ordinance before taking it to council.
Okay, Mona, how does that sound to you? And Matt?
So I really appreciate the spirit of all of these recommendations from the Shade Tree, and I support them. Each one of these things does involve an administrative task. And so it's important for us, to enforce these types of things. I would encourage council to consider as explicit legislation as possible. Where we get in trouble from an administration standpoint, trying to interpret, is when the criteria are a little too vague, and we don't really know how good these ideas are until it goes out into the wild, right? Until it hits that first UNO and first resident interacts with it. And so I just say that to encourage you to think about really good processes and things that don't put borough administration in, for lack of a better word, a pickle. Oftentimes, reading through those recommendations, there's a lot of guidance given to, or a lot of responsibility given to the Director of Public Works. And so I know Ed's not here to speak to this himself, but I feel pretty confident that Ed would say, so long as I have really good guidance as to what the expectations are, it gives the borough admin enough force to enforce these things. So just to say that yes, I do believe that these are good ideas. I think that they are, they're doable. I do think that the next step is to have the solicitor take a look at it from a legal standpoint. And we'll start thinking about these processes internally in the office and how that will affect our current processes, because it'll directly affect the UNO process. So I'll need to get Michelle Carroll's input. She's the UNO guru.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
I have a question about that. Is this something that we could postpone for a month until we are fully staffed, so as not to overburden our staff right now?
I think for the solicitor can do their work in advance of that. Ed Harmon did sit through several conversations that the Shade Tree had about this issue, and he suggested that the enforcement would be done along with curbs and sidewalks, that it would be part of the same UNO application. And he was a party to those discussions and had some ideas about enforcement and so forth. But seems to me that the solicitor could start measuring kind of and scaling an ordinance that would be appropriate for Narberth, and then we can talk about implementation, and administration, the ability of the administration to enforce it. as a next step, which would take us several months down the road, Mona.
Oh, it would. Okay. I just want to be mindful of the fact that our staff has a lot of priorities right now, and I'd like them to be able to focus on the utmost priorities without adding more ordinances on. So, okay, if that will take a couple months anyway before it gets to their table, then that sounds good to me.
Okay, good. Yeah, Mona, I think I like what you're saying. We don't want to burden, Matt is working without an assistant manager right now. So yeah, let's do that. Let's ask our solicitor to do his piece, and then we can wait, to talk with Matt about this later.
Well, I appreciate that, and I don't want to use that as an excuse not to do things also. That's why I'm saying I really like these ideas, and I think we should be moving them forward. It will take me a little longer to do it. There is an internal administrative piece that needs to be done, talking about the ever so not fun to talk about permit design, or the application design, right? There's all these minutia. It's fun to talk about these things now, about what it would mean, but the reality of it is that the UNO application form now needs to be updated, and the language needs to be concise, and it needs to be legally sound, so it doesn't put us in a precarious situation. So those things take time, take some energy. I like where it's headed. I like that we're continuing to talk about it, and I do appreciate the sensitivity to not being fully staffed. So thank you.
Okay, great. So let's move ahead then to the next item, which is this dog barking ordinance brought to us by Lisa McCann, a resident, a few months ago. And she's done some research and emailed the committee with a proposed draft revision of our current dog barking ordinance. And I think the main addition is she's added some more specific language, including times, 15 minutes of continuous barking, 30 minutes of, I think, intermittent barking. So this is an issue that we have discussed. I don't think we need to take a lot of time on it, but I would just like to ask the committee, is this also something then that we would like to have our solicitor look at? Bob or Mona?
Yeah, Rob, I'm in favor of that. I think I really appreciate the work that Lisa did. It was thorough. She really looked into what other municipalities around in our region have done about this problem. And I agree with her. I think this is like sort of a hole in our legislation when there's a nuisance barking at your neighbor's house. And it's good to have a very specific standard so that it's clear to everyone how to define that nuisance and do something about it. And so, yeah, I think it's ready to go to the solicitor.
Mona?
No, I don't think so. I think I appreciate all of the work that Lisa has done on this. I think that she is very thorough. I think that she represents one constituent, and I think that we need to think about how to balance the interests of all constituents. I think it was excessive. So 15 minutes of barking intermittently during the day is I think that's over regulation. So I would definitely take out the word intermittently. I would expand the amount of time of barking, and I would have different times for barking based on whether it's at night or in the daytime. I did read Lisa, I did read your email carefully, and I did read your arguments for why you think the time shouldn't matter, but I think there are other arguments to balance that. So I think I think we really need to think about balancing interests of dog owners in our borough with interests of other residents. And yes, we are a very densely populated borough with people that share a lot of common walls, but I think the 15 minutes of intermittent barking is too restrictive.
So just to have a little back and forth with you, Mona, I hear you, and I can understand why you see that as too restrictive. I think I don't take the law so literally. I think it's providing some very specific guidance that in the instance that someone's really has a nuisance neighbor with a nuisance animal that they're leaving at home that's barking, something can actually be done about it.
I agree, and that's important.
There's only, this is not just an N of one. It's I mean, it is for her, but in the years I've been on council, this has occurred 3 times. There's been this complaint 3 times, and once from someone on Conway, and once from someone up on Essex, and then I guess this is over on Hamden. So it's usually where the houses are smaller and closer together, and what happens for the neighbor who's being bothered by the dog is that they have no recourse with a more vaguely written law. So with a very, very sharply written or very constrained law, something can be done on behalf of the person who's being bothered. This doesn't happen frequently. I mean, you don't hear neighbors complaining about barking dogs really ever. I mean, I rarely hear about it.
So, sure. Listen, I have heard about people complaining. I don't know how many of them have complained to the borough. We have a dog near us that barks constantly. I have 2 dogs that bark every time, someone walks by in the street. But I fully agree with Lisa's point and your point that it can't be so vague. Our ordinance is absolutely too vague. I agree with that 100%. It also falls to what Matt was saying about needing ordinances to be specific for enforcement. I agree with that. But I disagree with you, Bob, that you can't take this literally. If you're going to put things in there like 15 minutes of intermittent barking, that's very literal, and that is a very strict standard. So, I mean, maybe it would be something more like, I don't know, between the hours of 10 and 7, 20 minutes of continuous barking, and during the daytime hours, maybe an hour of continuous barking. I don't know. All I'm saying, I agree with Lisa's premise. I sympathize with her situation. I agree with what she's saying, that our ordinance is too vague. And I understand that she's very frustrated because she's been calling and she hasn't gotten a remedy. So I do think we need to do something. I'm just disagreeing with the amount of restrictiveness in the suggestions.
Mona, may I ask you, as one solution, because I'm looking at the clock, Mona, would you be willing to draft language that you would be comfortable with, that's in that kind of Goldilocks zone? It's like specific but not too restrictive? Or would you like me to ask the solicitor to do that?
I'd be willing
to take the draft.
I'd be willing to have our solicitor take another look at local ordinances. I know Lisa has done a good job with that, but I think it's also a due diligence of our solicitor to do that and to suggest a range of other ordinances as well.
That's perfect.
Okay.
That's exactly what I was hoping for, Rob.
Good. Okay, Lisa, I know it's not public comment, but if you can make a brief comment.
Just want to say the really bad experience with this was 3 hours during the day. So the idea of, and that's when a lot of pets have separation anxiety, when their owners are out of the house. So I feel strongly about the daytime hours.
Okay.
Well, yeah,
right.
I would think 3 hours would be too lax. 15 minutes would be too restrictive. 3 hours would be too lax. So I hear you, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Lisa, for your research on this and bringing this to us. And I think we can find somewhere, some standard that we can agree on. So if everyone agrees, I will ask the solicitor to look at this and offer some language back to the committee to consider.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, thank you. So I wanted to move through the next few items pretty quickly because it's almost 7 o'clock and we have, of course, our next meeting at 7:30. So maybe we could do the next 2 together with Matt's help. The Price Crossing development originally required an emergency road access with a bollard that would be up to prevent everyday traffic from using the road. And so we've had a request to make sure that that bollard is functioning and keeping, most cars out, except in the case of an emergency. We've also had requests for signs on Sabine, to enforce the one way. So I wonder, Matt, if you could speak maybe briefly to these two items, and we could return to them, of course, next time.
Yeah, sure. So the emergency access road on Price Crossing is part of the development that happened way back when in 2016, 2017. Can't believe it's been that long already. There was a provision that had an access road and a collapsible bollard. The bollard has been, it's been reported to the borough that the bollard has been in the down position and that delivery trucks and residents are using that access road as continuous access. So working with the developers, we've made contact with one of the new residents as part of the homeowners association there. We're trying to remedy the situation to make sure that it's only emergency vehicle access for that area. The thing that is the sticking point now has to do with trash collection. And so Ed Harmon has actually met with Republic up there today, and they are in the process of trying to figure out how trash collection can be done in an effective manner for the Price Crossing development. Because currently the trash trucks have also been using that access road. It's a pretty steep curve going up into that development, and met today and said they're just not able to back up. That's not an option. So I don't have an answer for that yet. We're still working on that solution. Hopefully we can come up with a good solution. Republic has been really good to work with in that regard. The road sign review process, there's nothing to report there. I know, Rob, when you and I talked about the agenda, I just like to have things on the agenda as a talking point to keep it in the forefront, just to keep our eyes on it. I haven't made any progress on that yet. That is a nice to have right now, not a need to have in my triaging of borough activities in the past 3 weeks. Certainly on my radar. As soon as we get the folks together, the traffic engineer and others will have more to report, hopefully maybe next month or the following month. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Matt. Okay, the next two items we have are also very brief. We had spoken as a committee last year about some rat control problems on both the north side and the south side. And President Muterick suggested that we have an official communication from the borough. And so I have drafted something very preliminary, but that's something that the committee could look at. You could feel free to suggest any changes to me, and I could work with Matt on that over the next month, so that maybe we could send out an email in the weekly newsletter. The next item is the recycling guide that the Climate Action NARBs worked on together with Civic. And I thank the folks that worked on that. It's a really impressive piece of work because it involved a lot of back and forth with Republic to figure out what exactly can be recycled. And this guide gives us images that I think will help all of us in figuring out what to put in our yellow bins. So this is something that has been vetted by the CAN group. The EAC has endorsed it. So we would like to, the recommendation to our committee is that this page be added to the website under the trash and recycling tab. So I just want to ask if there's any objection to that. Otherwise, I would work with Matt on that.
Oh, Rob, when you sent it out in the email, I really admired it. I thought it was so beautifully composed and great illustrations and language. And I actually turned it into the signature of my email. I thought you were using it as a signature on your email, like as a way of reminding residents. of this requirement. So I turned it into the signature on my emails too.
Great. Okay.
And actually, I felt the same way about the preliminary draft that you did on remedies for rodents and pests. And I thought, I think it's good enough to send out now, and then it could go out immediately. And then if we want to make revisions in that rodent paragraph in the future, we could. But I think it's fine. Like, I think it's good enough now, and appreciate your work you did on that.
Okay.
Rob, hi. Just real quick question. I think we're sending out a newsletter this year. Am I right, Matt, that we're sending out an actual newsletter to everybody?
So I'd like to change the verb. We have sent out a newsletter this year. Unfortunately, if you've been paying attention to the news about the post office, we had sent it out in the beginning of December. Michelle Carroll did an awesome job getting it together, and we had everything ready to go for end of December. It had the new holiday trash schedule in it and everything. And here we find out that nobody has received it yet. So
yeah, I actually put an ad in it, and I didn't realize it was, because I was going to say if it hadn't been set out, that would be the kind of piece that people might want to hang on their refrigerator so they could look at it for reference.
Yep. And, this is not going to be a one and done newsletter. So I like that idea, and we can, I'll loop Michelle Carroll in on this, and I'll just take this moment to plug our newsletter. Please be on the lookout. Hopefully the post office, it's probably stuck in a truck since it's third class mail, the least priority type of mail. If anybody's really itching to get their hands on one, we've got a box of them in the office, and they look great. I know Michelle is going to have something about it, including a candid photo of me holding one of the newsletters in this week's Borough email. So keep your eye out on that for that.
Okay, great. So, all right, so that brings us to the MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding between Narberth and Lower Merion with regard to the police and possibly also fire. And so we have now about 12 minutes or so. We can have some discussion, and I was hoping we could turn to the chief to kind of walk us through the MOU.
Okay. Thank you, Rob. I appreciate it, and thanks everybody for your time. I sent this out to everybody on the call. The mayor and I have already, I've worked on it, obviously, and the mayor has reviewed it. So the draft that you currently see right now, this is the result of a lot of long labor-intensive hours that have scaled this down to 9 pages and really started to protect the borough's interest in terms of this agreement with Lower Merion. This format, this draft was sent over to Superintendent Mike McGrath on December the 3rd. I have yet to hear back from him on that, but I'm not too worried because usually we get together at the beginning of each calendar year anyway. The one thing that we have to talk about, Superintendent McGrath and I, is the baseline number of hours for coverage either per month or per year that's going to be covered currently right now to the premium that we pay for professional services from our budget to Lower Merion Township. And once we do that, we're going to have to look at additional funds, a cost rather, for hours that are going to be done in beyond that service. So that's kind of where we're looking at. We're trying to get to a baseline. Once we drill down on that language, that's just going to be one more add-on. Brief add-on, I mind you, for that MOU. So the one thing I would like to point out to everybody on the call is that if you look at section 3B, that is media inquiries, this has really been expanded to really protect the borough's interests when it comes to releasing information to the media. If Lower Merion Township is involved in an investigation where they have jurisdictional authority over the job, we still have to have protection for our borough, for our community, about information that's going to get released to the media. Now, there's some things that are beyond, both participating agencies' control, but whatever we can control is certainly going to try to be protected within that paragraph, within that section. As we move on through, I won't go through the whole MOU. I know that we're limited on time, Rob. I certainly understand that. But there are a couple different areas to really look at, to focus in on. So under operational support, which is section 7, that has really been rewritten and recrafted to really spell out the responsibilities in each section: radio and communication support, police service calls, and shift coverage. We have really fleshed that out in detail to make sure that there is a broad, a very broad and thorough understanding of what is required by each agency. For instance, as it comes to, Section 7B, where we really have to add the language about supervision on scene, strong on-scene supervision from either the police sergeant, which is upcoming, or the chief of police, versus that of supervisory staff from Lower Merion. So that those things really needed to be fleshed out, and I'm confident that I did a pretty good job doing that to really protect the borough's interest. As we move a little forward, right into investigations unit on the next page under letter D. This is very, very important, because when I first arrived at the job in May of 2018, I can tell you that Lower Merion did everything. They did all the investigations. They did investigations even for summaries. They did investigations for misdemeanors and felonies. We now have garnered a lot of that back. We now do investigations for lower level felonies, misdemeanors, and obviously summary offenses, where I deal directly with the Montgomery County District Attorney's Office for criminal complaints to get them approved and get records of declination and reviews done by assigned assistant district attorneys. So it's very important that this cooperation agreement have this language, because now, if you look ultimately at the annual premium that is paid in quarterly installments for this professional services, a lot of that had to do with investigations, at least in my opinion, because they were really putting in a lot of hours. Well, we have now taken that back off them. So I believe that that is something that Mike McGrath and I have to discuss. We've already discussed it to a limited degree, because that's going to have to get baked into the financial situation about what we're going to settle on, because we now do a lot of that. As a matter of fact, I can tell you maybe in the past 3 months, there was one investigation that may have gotten referred to the Lower Merion detectives for further review. Other than that, we handle everything ourselves. We are now a full service, community connected, 24/7 police department in every way, as benchmarked with any other agency. So that's something that's very, very important. The other section is supervision under E. That has been fleshed out as well and unpacked to really spell out, the responsibilities of each and how we can respond to emergencies in Lower Merion, and really even breaks it all the way further down the chain to officers, to make sure that they know that they can certainly respond to emergencies in Lower Merion Township along the border by using good judgment if there's an officer in trouble and they have to respond to an emergency. For instance, it could be a house fire. So we want to make sure that the officers use their own good judgment as well. So these are some of the things that we mapped out. Again, the mayor has reviewed it. I'll be meeting with Superintendent Mike McGrath. The one thing that we did have to change is we obviously had to change the name on the signature page on page 9 from Sean Metrick to Matt West as interim borough manager. Myself, Superintendent Mike McGrath, and the representative from Lower Merion Township. So the only other thing I'd like to mention is that under animal warden services, before the language just included services to the Narberth Police Department, but it was very important for us to spell out that includes actually animal warden service for the borough in general, not just the police department upon request. It's the borough in general that the Lower Merion Township Animal Warden, Ed Bogley, has provided really to us as a community. And I'll tell you what, he's done such a tremendous job. He's always there when we need him. I can't say enough about him. Our partnership with Ed has been outstanding. So these are just some of the things that I think are important for the MOU. We're going to move forward with this. The one thing I would recommend, as I mentioned, Rob, in my email, I would not recommend voting on this right now, until it gets moved forward regarding the other piece that I mentioned. But however, the Public Health and Safety Committee, as well as all council, should be very familiar with the language and to really, kind of get into the details of the MOU, because it is important. It's going to be in place for 5 years. It's a 5-year run. The good news is, even at the expiration of that 5-year period, that for everybody on the committee to understand, those arrangements, they continue. It doesn't stop. It doesn't hit a pause button. So right now, even though we don't have this in place, we are, in fact, operating under this current MOU as you really read it, because this is reflective of the current language as the relationship is staged right now. So I'm very proud of this document. I think this is something that is long overdue. It had to be rewritten and revised for the interest of the borough. When I first reviewed it back in May of 2018, I found a lot of concerns where really Lower Merion Township seemed like they had a lot more authority over the borough than I preferred, including our police department. And I really retooled it to protect not only our police department, but also, more or less the taxpayer in the community about what we needed. So it's a good document. It's very well put together. This is probably something that is going to be used as a future boilerplate and template for many, many years to come. I believe in our community.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, John. I really appreciate the work you've done on this document with the mayor. And I also appreciate that you're working in the best interest of the borough to get kind of the best deal for the borough. It sounds to me like there's a substantial number of hours that had been dedicated to investigative work that could be reallocated to shift coverage. And I know that you and the mayor will work with Matt, will work for the best deal, and please keep us apprised and let us know when how we can help. Mona, go ahead.
I just have a quick question. I know there were concerns brought up at the last council meeting about the firefighter part of it, that maybe we're not being reimbursed as much as we should for the times that our fire department makes calls to Lower Merion. So I'm wondering if there's been any movement on that part of it or how that's going.
I can speak to that, and then others feel free. So the fire piece of it, I would say that our police chief has been working on this, like he said, for a couple of years. So now we're at this point where we have this document, and we're not at the same point with the fire department. We don't have an existing. I don't know, Matt, do you want to speak to it? It's going to take more time, it seems, to get to the same place with fire.
It's complicated.
So can the two be separated, or they have to be included in the same document, or it's to our best interest to include them in the same document, or?
It's not included in this document. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, no, fire services are not included in this document at all. I think they have to be mutually exclusive because you're looking at paid organizations versus that of volunteer services.
Okay.
And obviously, Chief Dixon and Deputy Chief Henderson would have to charter that course in terms of conversation. There are MOUs in place, I'm sure, for firefighting services. But yes, you're right. There is certainly a balance because most of my understanding is that most of the services that are provided from the Norbert Fire Company are external to the borough or to the township. Yeah. And there's a reciprocity back and forth that should be recognized before they want to increase charges for one versus the other.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, Mona, your point is something I would like our committee to work on. I'd like us to be able to partner with the fire chief and develop that. But I don't think we'll have both documents kind of in place at the same time.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the mayor or Bob?
All good here.
No, I think it's been covered.
Okay, so Chief, you'll keep us updated. When our committee would be in a position to kind of recommend this document, vote on this document with council.
Absolutely, I'll be glad to do that. I would like to add that this is 9 pages, so I've been here for almost 3 years. So if I only come out with 9 pages after 3 years, you should probably let me go. Now, I would like to say I didn't exactly work on this straight for 3 years. I worked on quite a few other things too, but I certainly understand what you mean. And I really appreciate everybody taking the time to review it. And I thank everybody for the support because this is a very important piece for our department.
Hey, Rob, I just wanted to add on a great deal of acknowledgement and thanks to the chief for his professionalism and how detailed he was in bringing our police forward. equal to any of in the area. I think we can all be really proud of our police force, and I am.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay, so here we are at a public comment, 7:20, and we may have folks in the waiting room. So let's see. I see Carol Marie. Would
Yes,
you like?
I'd like to make a public comment, and it's one of them is about the fire aspect. I've been a wife of a volunteer fireman for almost 50 years. And have you spoken with Fran Dixon about this? About the fires being answered outside the borough? Because the way it seems to be is that Narberth Fire Company has a jurisdiction. They have a district. And with that district, the fire company can solicit donations to support the fire company in that district. If Narberth wants to start billing Lower Merion for fighting fires across Montgomery Avenue in Penn Valley, then the other fire departments are going to say, no, we're not going to do that. We'll just take over that district. So then Narberth Borough will be its only Narberth Borough Fire Department. It won't go anywhere else. But with that, the money of the donations will dwindle down to just Narberth Borough. And the question is, can Narberth Borough residents give enough donations to the fire company to maintain the fire department? And that's a really big part of the picture, because if you're taking away the donations that they would normally have through Penn Valley and Marion, whatever the district is, the fire company is going to fold because they won't have any donations coming in. So that's a real big picture. I don't know if you know that part of the picture, but that's something to definitely look into.
Thank you, Carol Marie. I mean, I know that Matt has had discussions, and with Sean when Sean was with us, and with Fran and Bill.
I also want to mention that our one-way problem is getting worse. Now, I know Chief Gallagher put the police car at the end of the street to deter one-way people, and it's not lawbreakers or people that are cutting through that are going the wrong way on our street. It's people who don't know that it's a one-way street because there's so few signs. Tonight at 6 o'clock, I was coming home from my daughter's in Morgantown. I turned right onto my street on Sabine, and there was a car that was zipping down the road the wrong way at the traffic light. And I came, a good thing I've got good brakes on my car. We would have had a head-on crash. Last week, I was pulling out from behind my Suburban. I was driving my smaller car, and there was a car driving down the road the wrong way. Again, I came within inches of a head-on crash. There are so many cars that go the wrong way on our street. And Matt, you're saying it's going to be a month or two before we can get something to figure this out. It needs to be sooner. We have so many wrong way cars on our street, and we have the daycare center, and we have the park. I feel like I've said the same thing for the last 7 years, and nobody cares. Nobody listens. Nobody cares. I mean, are you waiting for a fatality? Are you waiting for someone to have a head-on crash before we do something? Waiting for a kid to get hit?
So, Carol Marie, I think we all share your concern, and I'm sorry that you had yet another incident. It sounds so often,
It is often. That's the problem. It is often. And how often does it have to be before the council says, hey, you know what, we need to do something about this. We need to really take action, because it's happening, 10 cars a day. Some days more, some days less, but it is insane. Now, Chief Gallagher, he puts an officer here, and that's the day we don't have anybody going the wrong way down the street. But dark night, this poor woman, I don't know who was more scared, her or me, and she was one who backed around and went back the other way, because I told her she's on a one-way street. That poor woman scared her to death as I pull around my street legally, when she is innocently going the wrong way because she didn't know, because there's not enough signage.
Mm-hmm. What I hear you saying is that you're not blaming folks. You're empathizing with these folks, but there's a structural problem that needs to be fixed.
And I've been saying this for 7 years.
Yeah, and I think that what we've committed to is a process. I mean, that's what the committee has decided. We want to recommend a process for reviewing road signs, and we would like to see that happen sooner rather than later. Now, we recognize that, you know, this is a transition moment for the office staff. So so it's a balancing act. You know, I mean, I would love to see it happen sooner, but we do want to have a process. That's something that we agree to. So I don't have a date for you. I wish I could say we'll have this figured out by February 15th, you know, but it is on our agenda.
Rob, can I offer something?
Yes, please.
So just to Carol Marie's point, yes, there are a lot of concerns up there. I know we've discussed this before. One is the Wonder Springs Early Learning Center right there that we're very concerned about. I've gone up there. We've done a lot more than just sending an officer out there periodically. I can tell you what we've done exactly. We've had officers up there multiple times, multiple at different times during the day. In addition to that, I've been up there personally myself. I've sat at that corner looking for traffic to go the wrong way. I've checked the do not enter signs at the end of the street at North Essex Avenue. I personally went up there and positioned a car at that location, left it there for about 5 to 6 days. The one concern that I have is obviously as a priority is the children. But at number two, my only worry about just adding a one-way sign, and I guess we would have to do a traffic study out there, or at least a sign study to see if it's appropriate. My only concern is as we place a marked unit facing the way where traffic should not enter, and they ignore, a police car that's sitting there at the corner of North Essex and Sabine, I'm not exactly sure what an additional sign would do. I know that the police car doesn't spell out the direction or doesn't have do not enter on it. But usually when people see a police car parked at the corner facing you and you see those do not enter signs, that's usually a pretty good, indicator that you shouldn't go up that street. So my only
John,
concern.
I agree with you, but so many cars park the wrong way on other streets in Narberth that people are just desensitized to cars parked like the way that police car was. And the point is that people miss the sign, and you and I have spoken multiple times, it's a long block. And if you miss the one way at the beginning of the street, there is nothing until the end of the street. And by that time, you're sitting in your car. The one-way signs are way above your head. You don't even see those.
Okay, Carol Murray, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
And I think I may have asked this before, but let's say we put a one-way sign right there in the middle of that street where you've actually pointed that out to me. Would you, if you think that a car would come up that street in the 200 block of Sabine the wrong way and then suddenly see that sign off to their left or right at the crest of Sabine, not too far from that sign, would you expect people to suddenly stop and turn around, or is it just to slow traffic?
Well, I know if I'm going down a street and I see a one-way sign, I will turn around and go the other way. And I'd say about 50% of the cars, once we bring it to their attention, turn around. The other ones tell us that we're number one, and they go down the street and get stuck at Montgomery Avenue and fly out on Montgomery Avenue.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, It's not an easy answer, but we need to do something because there were signs there and they've been missing for about 7 years. And I don't know where they went. I don't know, what happened, but where we've talked about the signs. And I mean, I got to tell you, I was incredibly rattled coming so close to a head-on crash tonight. And
Carol Marie, I'm sorry to interrupt, but we do have our next meeting at 7:30. I appreciate you bringing this to us again. Yet we are listening and we do want to act in the next few months. So please stay with us and let us know how we can help.
Well, I don't feel that y'all are you're just kicking it down the can. You've been kicking it down the can for 7 years. And that's how I feel about it. And I'm not the only one on our block.
Thank you, Carol Marie. This ends our meeting as we have to go to the next one. Okay, have a good night.